about this series we've been looking at as we think about our church values and the focus we have as a church. And we come to that topic of welcoming, to be a welcoming people. It's one of the things that the church signed up to nearly 10 years ago now, and we're going to reflect on that this morning. To help us do that, we're going to look at a number of different passages from the Bible that speak into that topic. And Andy is going to come and read one of them from James chapter 2. Thanks, Andy. James, Andy, you're Andy, aren't you? Great. Glad I know what's going on. Thanks, pal.
So James chapter 2, verses 1 to 7. My brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ must not show favoritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, "Here's a good seat for you," but say to the poor man, "You stand there," or "Sit at the floor by my feet," have you not discriminated amongst yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him? Mm-hmm. But you have dishonored the poor. Is it not the rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? Are they not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name of him to whom you belong? Mm-hmm. Amen.
Thanks, Andy. James was speaking into a particular situation where it seems that the sort of rich and the wealthy were dragging away people who they felt had wronged them and taken them to court and so on and so forth. But yet he was saying that those are the people that you honour when you gather together. And he was saying this seems very, very strange. And he was suggesting a different way. And we're going to reflect on that and other things. But first, I want to share a story. Many of you have met our youngest son, Dave. He's been over here a few times. He and his wife and young son live in Sheffield at the moment. But 16 years ago, roughly 16 years ago, Dave had just left university and he started his first job. He was a youth worker in a church in Buckingham. And Joe and I visited him one Sunday, and we were going to the evening service at his church. We had been told that there were refreshments available before the service, and we thought, why not? We'll go ahead and we'll go and join in, be an opportunity to meet some of the people that Dave was working with and serving. Sounded like a good thing to do at the time. But for some reason, when Joe and I entered the room where refreshments were laid out, Dave wasn't with us. I think he might have been preparing for what was going to happen, or maybe doing something with the youth. I forget exactly what. So we just looked like two random visitors. It's always interesting to see how random visitors are treated and responded to. In the middle of a fairly large room, nothing like this, but quite a large room, there was a table laid with what looked like a very nice spread. It was certainly more than simple refreshments. This was not coffee and biscuits. This was, good. A meal, maybe not quite that, but it was significant. And there was chairs arranged all the way around these tables that had been laid out. It's the idea people come and they grab a seat and they take what they want and they eat and they share. Each chair had someone sitting on it. There were no gaps between any of them. So we walked in and we just saw a load of backs of people. Apart from the ones who were facing us, we saw their faces. And it was not at all clear what we should do. There was nowhere to join in. And there was no help whatsoever from any of the people sitting around the table. They just continued with their conversation and enjoying the meal laid out before them. There was no indication at all that we had been noticed or that anyone was interested if they had noticed us. There was an urn off to one side, which meant we were able to make a drink. But that was the extent of our involvement with the promised refreshments, along with no engagement at all with those who are there as part of the church family. It was such an appalling demonstration of non-welcoming that it stayed with us for over 15 years. I've recovered, but it was a strange experience. Bizarrely, I was reminded of it when I arrived here into the Christian Centre last Sunday morning. Some of us are going through a Bible reading plan for Lent, and those who are able are meeting up for breakfast before the service. And so Joe and I turned up about 9:15 to join in with this breakfast. And so there was a small group of people already there, with most of them seated in a small oval just in front of the hatch. Those who are familiar with the room will know what hatch I'm referring to. And there was that sense of, they're there. And it was an interesting moment. But then I saw, it just took a couple of seconds, Andrew Terry, he was sitting on one of those red chairs. He was the one who seemed nearest to me and the one who was blocking us getting into that circle. But something really special happened. Andrew looked around, he saw that we were there, and without any fuss at all, just pushed with his feet and slid his chair against the wall, immediately opening the space so we were included. It just took a few seconds. It was very simple, but it was a great demonstration of people being aware of others and seeking to help people feel part of what was going on. So there's ways of getting it wrong, and there's ways of getting it right. But this focus on welcoming is so important. I guess each of us have been in situations at different times when we felt, would anybody care if we were not here? Does anybody know that we're here? Which does remind me, I wasn't going to mention this, but there was a time when I was traveling on business when I was working in IT, and I was in one of the major cities of the States. It sort of blurs. I forget which one it was now. But I was one evening, I was in a hotel on about the 27th floor or whatever it was, and I was looking out over the city. And I was on my own. I don't think I'd met up with the people I'd gone to do work with at that point. And it was night time, and there were lights all over the place, and cars driving around, and people meeting up and going off to various appointments, and a lot of life going on in that city. And I was thinking, this is my 30th birthday. I'm in a strange place. There's all these people having fun and enjoying themselves and doing what they do. And none of them care that I am here. There was no reason why they should care. I hadn't told them. But there was that moment I thought, all the people who care for me, who love me, who welcome me, are a long way away, or I'm a long way away from them on my 30th birthday. And it was a difficult moment. But then I realized I was only 29 and it wasn't much, and it was quite a bit better. But whatever, there's that sense of feeling not welcome. And so our focus on welcoming is important. When we speak about it, we say these things. This is what we signed up to. We seek to be warm and welcoming, accepting new people, valuing each other. And some of these words that were written about this focus area are quite important. They remind us of the foundational importance of being warm and welcoming. That we have the privilege, we have the opportunity to accept new people, but also to continue to value each other, people we've known for years, to welcome them, to continue to welcome them, recognizing that each person is an image bearer of God, made in God's image. Yeah, that image may be a bit tarnished from time to time, but made in God's image. And we recognize, we really appreciate the work of our welcoming team, who stand at the door, who greet people with a smile and encouragement, who are so important in giving that good first impression of who we are. Thank you to everyone who is part of that team. And we also recognize and really appreciate so many in the church family who speak to those who are new, who seek to ensure they're feeling welcome, and so on. That is also important and appreciated. And looking around last Sunday, I saw it happening in many really special ways, as it happens so many, many times. Thank you. But the call to be welcoming raises some important questions. And we'll think about those by looking at the passage we read a few moments ago, along with some other key verses that speak into different aspects of this. And my prayer is that we are able to build on the strong base we already have to become even more welcoming to every person we meet. Before we look at the passage that Andy read, I want to speak a bit about the person who wrote this letter, who wrote the letter of James, and his approach. He helpfully tells us a bit about himself at the beginning of his letter. He says, James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's how he introduces himself. That's how he wanted to be known. And the word servant here doesn't really convey the strength, the depth of meaning intended. It's the idea of being a slave, or somebody who's totally committed to somebody else, not resenting it, but rejoicing in that status. You can sort of sense a smile on the face of James. It says, I know who I am. I am a slave. I am fully committed to, willingly under the authority of Jesus. And that's how he considered himself. He was actually the half-brother of Jesus. He was one of the sons of Mary, who had another husband after, we believe, Joseph had died. And there was that thing in James that said, I just want to point people to yes, my half-brother, but that wasn't what he was focusing on, to the one to whom I've handed over authority of my life, to the one who is king. And so much of what he writes in this letter, full of guidance on how to live as a committed follower of Jesus, is drawn from the words of words of the person he refers to, drawn from the words and actions of Jesus as recorded in the Gospels. So as he calls on his readers in this passage to not show favoritism, but to welcome everyone alike, we see this demonstrated in the example of Jesus. In Matthew 9, we see Jesus goes out of his way to meet with people referred to as tax collectors and sinners, people who were shunned by society, people who were on the edge, people who were not welcome. And Jesus goes and spends time with them and welcomes them. In Matthew 8, he welcomes a leper, somebody who was cut off from the rest of the community. And Jesus reaches out and blesses him and touches him and draws him into community. In John 4, he meets a woman from a place called Samaria, a place sort of in the middle of Palestine, and that separated the north and the south of the country. People who had no dealings with the Jews, and Jesus himself was a Jew. But Jesus demonstrates that he is there for her as well. There was a time recorded in Luke 18 and elsewhere where parents are trying to bring their children, their young children, their babies to Jesus to be blessed, and that his disciples try and push them away, thinking that they were not important. And Jesus blesses them and says, they are important to me. There was a time, yes, when Jesus initially seemed to respond to someone negatively based on her nationality. She was a Greek lady, and Jesus had mainly come here for the Jews, at least in his early ministry. But after a conversation with her, he did respond positively and granted her request for healing for her daughter. Jesus broke the boundaries of polite society and said, everybody is welcome. And as well as living that way and providing such a powerful example, Jesus talks about it. For example, when he spoke positively in Matthew 25, for those who responded to those in need, as they gave food to the hungry, as they gave something to drink to the thirsty, as they gave clothing to the needy, as they looked after the sick, as they visited those in prison. It wasn't just welcoming. It was going beyond welcoming and seeking to respond to the needs of people they met. And Jesus goes on to explain that as they acted in this way, it was as though they were doing it to him. That they were giving food to a hungry Jesus, that they were giving drink to a thirsty Jesus, and so on. So there's the idea that as we welcome others and seek to be a blessing to them, it is as though we are doing it for Jesus. What an amazing privilege that is. And Jesus makes it explicit in Matthew 10, where he's talking about one of his disciples welcoming another. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. And anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me, speaking about God. So this simple act of welcoming others draws us into the privilege of welcoming Jesus and welcoming the Father as well. So as we welcome another believer into our church family, into our church gatherings, there are these wonderful ways in which this extends through to our relationship with God. And it's worth noting that in these passages that encourage welcome, sometimes there's a general encouragement to welcome to everybody, and that's important. But in other times, there's a particular focus on what happens and what is involved when we welcome other believers, other people who are part of God's family, brothers and sisters in Christ. And as we extend this welcome to people, we're inviting other people to come into our context, to share their ideas, their perspectives, their experiences, which in turn can enhance and develop our own understanding of Jesus and how he engages with people. It's a great thing to do, and it can be the basis of much blessing. So with these examples and words of Jesus as a backdrop, James calls on his readers to welcome people as people and not to differentiate based on perceived wealth or appearance. And the particular example he gives is there's this man wearing fine clothes, and you look at him and you think, yeah, he's somebody to respect, somebody we want to honor. Come out of a good seat, I say. Maybe one that's not obscured by pillars, or who knows. But you see this man who comes dressed in rags, who's got that sense of poverty, and you say, yeah, there's little value in that person, so come on, keep out of the way over here. That's what James is speaking against. I think it's important for us to think about. And this might present itself in lots of different ways. It might not be a matter of what we think someone was worth or how they are dressed. It could be many other things that affect how we really welcome other people. It could be something about their appearance, the sort of things they say, or something about their behavior that makes us feel a bit hesitant, where we don't find it easy to offer an unreserved and unconditional welcome. Or we may need to think about the reasons behind why we feel particularly welcoming to somebody or not. And one of the ways I've had to challenge myself in this area is about whether I think the person I am welcoming can be useful. When I was leading a small church in a place called Harlington, it's about half a mile north of Heathrow Airport, This was sort of 2009, 2000 to 2012, that period. We quite regularly had a number of people joining our services while waiting for a connecting flight. They'd arrived at Heathrow probably on Saturday evening. They were flying out again on Sunday afternoon, and they wanted to attend a church service. We were probably the nearest church gathering to them, and so often we had people who turned up just to be with us on that Sunday morning. And some people who they were obviously frequent flyers. They ended up being with us quite a lot, and we started to develop a relationship with them. But I became aware that it was so easy for me to lose interest in people when I heard that they were just on a stopover and we were unlikely to see them again. I was tempted to think that because they weren't going to stay around and get involved, I should focus and concentrate on other people instead. But the lesson I had to learn was welcoming people is not about the benefit it might bring, but it's about welcoming people and being genuinely interested in them as image bearers of God, as individuals, as people who are valuable, as people who are worth recognizing and welcoming and engaging with. It's not what they could do for me. It's simply because of who they are as individuals. And I wonder if there's lessons that each of us need to learn in this area. Hebrews 13 talks about the importance of welcoming. In this case, he talks about hospitality. One of the things that he reminds us of is that when we set out to welcome someone, particularly for the first time, we don't know anything about them. We don't know who we are greeting. And that is exciting, but it also requires us to be ready to engage with anyone. Another experience of this, and this probably wasn't meeting an angel without knowing it, was again from my time in Harlington when I was in the church building doing some final preparation for a morning service, and a lady I'd never seen before came in, maybe about 20 minutes before the service was due to start, and she sat down. Roughly, transposing it, roughly where Rachel is sitting now, that sort of place. And I noticed her. I realised I hadn't seen her before, and I went over and introduced myself and welcomed her. And we started to make conversation. And I thought, I'll ask her what her plans are for the rest of the day after the service. That's what I asked her. And she quietly and calmly told me that after the service, she was going to go off to commit suicide. And she opened this carrier bag she had with her and showed all the tablets that she had that she was going to take that would enable her to commit suicide. This was not a response I was expecting. And it resulted in a lot of work, extending a lot of support, trying to help her find accommodation, and so on. She didn't commit suicide. There was a long story there. But I ended up spending a lot of time, maybe too much time, trying to work with her to show that there was another way, that life wasn't for giving up and just taking it away. I'm not sure I handled it in the best way possible, but it reminded me that welcoming people can have some interesting consequences. It can lead us into things that we're not expecting. But that's part of being prepared to welcome people and enter into their context, enter into their situation. But it's not just when we welcome new people. You might be welcoming someone, saying hello to somebody that you have known for many years. And many in this church have been here for many, many years. And so when you greet somebody on a Sunday morning, it's somebody you have known for years, for decades. But you might not be aware that there is something going on in their lives. It might be positive, it might be negative, but they need to share that with someone. And you might be the person that God is putting in front of them at that moment to welcome them and to engage with them, to be there for them. When we greet people, when we welcome people, when we put that smile on and say, hello, it's good to see you, how are you doing? Let's not assume we know what's going on in their lives, but let's be sensitive to them and to the Spirit as we seek to be a blessing and encouragement to them. And maybe the most basic reason we have for accepting and welcoming others is because Jesus has accepted and welcomed us. And Paul refers to this in Romans 15. Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. Paul is coming towards the end of an argument over the first part of this chapter and the end of chapter 14, where he's been engaging with the fact that different people in the church at Rome had different views on some specific issues. The sort of things they were debating and working out were whether there were certain things that could or could not be eaten, some days that should be treated as more holy than others. And it calls on each of them to be faithful to what they believe, but to not let those issues divide them. And his basis for this is the example of Jesus. It starts by us realizing who we are. This is vital. This is fundamental. To know that those of us who claim to be following Jesus, we've been accepted by him. We've been welcomed into his family. And we recognize the cost that was involved for Jesus to be able to accept us. It involved dealing with our sin, which led him to die on a cross. And because of that, we can come to him. We can find forgiveness. We can find a new start. We can find a new identity, to know that we are welcome in God's presence because of Jesus. This is the great equalizer. We all come to Jesus in the same condition, with the same need, and he extends his love and forgiveness to us all. He accepts us. And here, Paul is calling on believers to act in the same way towards other believers. We don't welcome each other because we are nice people. Oh, most of us are not too bad. We welcome each other because we are family. Brought together by Jesus into the family of God. Family for whom Jesus died. Family whom Jesus unites. And this doesn't mean that we ignore it when we see people living in a way that goes against how Jesus calls us to live. It doesn't mean there's never arguments or disagreements. But it does mean that we seek to encourage and convince and guide from a place of welcome, a place of friendship. So being welcoming is not just a nice thing to do. It is, but it's not just that. It's something that is hugely important, and it's a response to all that Jesus has made possible. Here are 2 questions to think about, to reflect on, and to pray into. Are there things that we are doing? Are there things that you are doing that make people feel unwelcome? Are there things we could do? Are there things you could do that would make people feel even more welcome? Simple questions, but challenging questions, as we think how we can encourage each other as we draw together as the family of God. Let's be quiet for a moment to reflect. I'll pray, and then Rachel and whatever part of the group are left will lead us in a final song.